Front. Sit up.
At this time, mate, you're under arrest on suspicion of murder. You don't have to say anything, but may harm your defense if you do not mention when questioned.
This is Yustin Andre Moscara, a Colombian adult content creator. On the night of July 10th, 2024, he was seen dragging two heavy suitcases through the streets of Bristol, England. It was close to midnight when people began to notice something was wrong. A dark red liquid was leaking from one of the suitcases. Bystanders stopped him on Clifton Suspension Bridge and started asking questions. Moscara appeared agitated, sweating heavily, and clearly desperate to avoid attention. Moments later, he dropped the suitcases and ran. As he fled, he shouted in Spanish, "Vete, vete, mi jefe es muy malo," meaning, "Go away, my boss is very bad," before pushing a cyclist who was trying to film him and disappearing into the darkness. When police arrived and opened the suitcases, they discovered something far worse than anyone expected. Inside were human remains. Not one person, but two. What looked like panic was actually the final failure of a carefully planned double murder. By 11:57 p.m., bridge staff had alerted authorities. The bridge was immediately sealed off, forensic tents were erected, and officers confirmed from the number of body parts that this was a double homicide. A nationwide manhunt began that same night. The most important clue wasn't CCTV or fingerprints. It was something much simpler. Attached to one of the suitcases was a luggage tag. The address led investigators more than 120 miles away to a flat in Shepherd's Bush, London. When police forced entry the following day, they walked into a scene of extreme violence. Bloodstains covered the walls and floors. Knives and a hammer were found inside the home. In the hallway stood a large chest freezer. Inside it were the decapitated heads and additional body parts of two men. The victims were identified as Paul Longworth, aged 71, and Albert Alfonso, aged 62. They were civil partners who had been together for over 20 years. Neighbors were stunned. Paul was described as quiet, dependable, and recently retired from his work as a handyman. Albert was outgoing, warm, and well-liked by everyone who knew him. Nothing about their lives suggested danger, except for one decision. They had recently taken in a lodger. That lodger was Yustin Andre Moscara, the same man seen fleeing from Clifton Suspension Bridge. Moscara was not a stranger to them. Albert had met him online in 2012, while Moscara was working as an adult content creator in Colombia. Over time, they stayed in contact. In October 2022, Albert invited Moscara to London. Paul was aware of the sexual nature of their relationship and did not object. In June 2024, after Paul and Albert had visited Colombia earlier that year, Moscara returned to London and stayed in their home. They supported him financially, gave him a place to live, and even paid for English classes. What they didn't know was that while living under their roof, Moscara was quietly planning their deaths. Digital forensic evidence later revealed what he had been doing. He studied their routines. He accessed their financial spreadsheets. He researched the value of their apartment and attempted to open bank accounts in their names. His internet searches included how long it takes for a body to decompose, how to kill someone with a single blow, and where to buy large freezers. Shortly before the murders, he purchased one. This wasn't impulsive violence. It was preparation. On July 8, 2024, while Albert was out teaching swimming lessons, Moscara closed the curtains inside the flat. He attacked Paul using a hammer from Paul's own toolkit. Paul attempted to defend himself, but was overpowered and killed. Moscara concealed the body and waited. That evening, Albert returned home. Video footage later recovered from inside the flat showed Moscara pulling a knife from beneath a cloth and attacking Albert. Albert was stabbed multiple times and died at the scene. What happened afterward disturbed even seasoned investigators. The footage showed Moscara singing and dancing beside Albert's body. Detectives later described his behavior as deeply disturbing. Moscara then attempted to transfer £4,000 from the victim's bank accounts and was caught on surveillance footage using Albert's cards at an ATM. He began dismembering both bodies, following instructions he had researched online. The heads were placed inside the chest freezer. The remaining body parts were packed into 2 suitcases, lined with bin bags. On July 10th, Moscara hired a red van and transported the suitcases from London to Bristol, a journey of around 120 miles. The driver had no idea what he was carrying or who he was sitting next to. Once in Bristol, Moscara attempted to walk the suitcases towards Clifton Suspension Bridge. When one of the wheels broke, he took a taxi for the final stretch. His plan was to throw the suitcases into the river below. But the weight of the bags, the leaking liquid, and the presence of witnesses stopped him. After fleeing the bridge, Moscara spent nearly an entire day roaming the streets of Bristol. On July 11th, armed police arrested him at Bristol Temple Meads railway station. He initially claimed self-defense, alleging that Albert had killed Paul in a jealous rage. That story collapsed almost immediately. Work records showed Albert was away during Paul's murder, and digital evidence proved long-term planning. In April 2025, Moscara went to trial. He pled guilty only to manslaughter, claiming he lost control. The jury rejected that claim after seeing the evidence of premeditation, financial motive, and the footage recovered from inside the flat. On July 21, 2025, Yustin Andre Moscara was found guilty of 2 counts of murder. The judge described the case as a thoroughly wicked plan, stating that Moscara had exploited kindness and trust in the most calculated way possible. He was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of over 40 years before parole consideration. This was not a crime of rage, it was a crime of calculation. 2 men opened their home to someone they believed they were helping. That kindness was studied, exploited, and ultimately used against them. And in the end, the entire plan collapsed, not because of police brilliance or advanced technology, but because a suitcase leaked on a bridge.